Hello, everybody. We are starting the classes. It's about basal insulin titration. People think that adjusting the insulin dosage is very difficult. And today we will teach you and tell you how easy it is. I'll give you a small example. Suppose you need 10 liters of milk to your house and your cow is giving you only 7 liters. What do? You buy 3 liters. Suppose your cow becomes older, it gives you only 5 liters, then you buy 5 liters from outside. So, as the insulin deficiency increases, you add a little more insulin from outside, and there is a day to day variation. And this variation can be adjusted when once you learn how to titrate your basal insulin. Suppose you want to set your hair, suppose you want to look at your face, what do? You look at the mirror. It's very simple. To titrate the basal insulin, you actually have to look at the fasting blood sugar. And when once you look at the fasting blood sugar, you learn to add to or decrease to. It's that simple. It's not at all difficult. And today we have Dr. Bhavna Sosle. She's behind me, and she'll be taking through the classes. And I'll meet you all again after the classes. Have a great classroom.
Hi everyone, so we'll switch onto the whiteboard mode now and we'll go on to some maths, and it's very basic maths and you'll all be experts on how to adjust basal insulin at the end of this video. So remember, this is just for basal insulin again. We'll be naming the different basal insulins available in the Indian market today, 1st of Jan 2021. So if you're on one of these insulins, please watch this video. If you're on a different insulin, this does not apply to you. So, and if you're pregnant also, again, this doesn't apply to you. So thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Now let's look at how to adjust basal insulin. So if you're on one of these insulins, Lantus, Basalog, Basaglar, Tresiba or Toujeo, you are on basal insulin. So this video applies to you if you're on one of these brand names that I have mentioned here. If you're taking a different insulin, please ask the doctor how to adjust the insulin dose on a day-to-day basis based on the blood sugars. But if someone is on basal insulin, what are we trying to achieve? We're first trying to fix our fasting blood sugar. So we call this as fix fasting first. The first blood sugar we want corrected is the fasting. And once that's corrected, even then, if the HbA1c is above target, then we start looking at the rest of the sugars after the meal to bring them under control. So what do we want the fasting blood sugar to be? For most people, we want the fasting blood sugar to be between 71 and 120. If someone is slightly older or younger, or someone has other complications in the heart or the kidney, these targets may slightly vary. So discuss with the doctor to know what your individual targets are. But for most people without complications, this video should guide you and help you adjust insulin at home. So what we want is the fasting value within this range. So if the fasting is more than 120, that is high. If the fasting is below 70, that's a low sugar. So what do we do with the basal insulin? It's very simple math. It's just the rule of 2. So if your fasting is normal between 71 and 120, don't do anything. Leave the blood sugar as it is, so you don't have to change it. It has to be in the same value, so you don't have to panic that you have a low sugar. So you leave the insulin as it is. So whatever dose of insulin you take that gets your blood sugar to normal values, that's the correct dose for you. So when you check your sugar, if your fasting is still high, that means the amount of insulin you're taking is not enough. So what you do is add +2 to your current dosage. So if you're taking 14 units, make it 16. Or if you're taking 34, you make it 36. You get the idea. If your fasting blood sugar is low, below 70, correct the hypoglycemia. Then do you skip insulin? Do you stop insulin? Well, neither. You reduce the insulin dose. So if you have a low sugar, whatever your current insulin dose is, just reduce it by 2 units. So let's take an example and see how to do this. So let's say we've started you on the dose of insulin. Usually the starting dose is a lower dose. So we've started with, let's say, 10 units. And you check the fasting blood sugar every 2 to 3 days and adjust the basal insulin. So how often should you check? If that's a question you're thinking about just now, well, every 2 to 3 days. So we've started with 10 units, and when we check after 2 days after starting 10 units of insulin, the blood glucose in the fasting state is 150. So ask yourself, where is this in the normal range, abnormal range, high, low? And we want our fasting under 120, so 150 is clearly high for us. So what do? We just add 2 units to our current insulin dose. So the insulin dose instead of 10 goes up to 12. So we check the sugar again after another 2 to 3 days, and what we see is the fasting blood sugar is 140. Is this normal? Unfortunately, not yet. So what do we do again? We add another 2 units to the current insulin dose. So the 12 units becomes 14 units. After 3 days, check your sugars again, and what you see is a fasting blood sugar of 100. So what are you going to do now? Well, you actually do absolutely nothing. So if your fasting value is in the normal range, keep the insulin dose as it is. Don't increase, don't decrease. So what should we take again? We continue the same dose of 14 units. So what do we see after a couple of days? Well, when we check the sugars again, the sugar has slightly changed. It has gone up to 144. So what do we do now? We increase our insulin by another 2 units because 144 is a little high for us. So 14, we increase the insulin dose to 16 units. What do we find when we increase it to 16? After another 2 to 3 days, the fasting blood sugar is 68. Now, is this normal? No. So we correct the hypoglycemia, and when there is hypoglycemia, we should not skip insulin, or we shouldn't really come back to the starting dose of insulin because we have come a long way. So what we do is reduce insulin from the current dose by 2 units. So what is our insulin dose going to be? 16 minus 2, which is 14. So then what happens to our blood glucose value? After another 2 days, when we check, it is 82. So this is normal. So what are we going to do now? This is a normal range. Keep the insulin dose as it is. Don't change it at all. So continue 14. Check after another 3 days. What is the fasting blood sugar? 134. So it's gone up a little bit. So what are we going to do now? We want to add 2 to our 14, increase insulin to 16. What happens to the sugars with 16 units? This comes down to 90. Now there's all of this variation, and you may wonder why. Because our blood sugars fluctuate on a, I wouldn't even say day-to-day basis, on a minute-to-minute basis, second-to-second basis. So it's changing constantly. So we need to adjust insulin based on these values. There are a lot of factors that cause our sugars to change. It can be our lifestyle, like diet, exercise, amount of activity we've had, the kind of food we've eaten, stress, sleep, and so on. So this intrinsic variation in every single person, even if our whole day-to-day routine is the same, also happens, which is why insulin dose adjustment is important for us to come to our target. So while we want the target to be 71 to 120, majority of the people, few of you who are younger, you may need to get to a stricter target. Some of you who are older, you may actually want to have a slightly higher target. But you use the same guidelines to adjust insulin once you go back home. So sit with us on a one-to-one basis. Then we can teach you about each of these individual insulins based on what actually concerns you, based on what you're taking, and figure out what your individual blood sugar target is. But these are the guidelines to adjust insulin at home. Fix fasting first and the rule of two. And don't worry, don't skip insulin. If there's a hypo, reduce insulin from the current dose by 2 units. Titration is important and it helps you get to your targets, and this can prevent long term complications from diabetes.